Hi Luntan, our video blog forum in which we explore, conversationally, important issues and ideas impacting the relationship between China and America. I'm Carson Tavener, your host for today's show. Now, this is the first time that we've had a panel of two guests, and we're very excited to have them each here today. Starting with West Coast and then going to the East, we have, in the state of Washington, Conrad Lee, City Council member and former mayor of Bellevue, Washington, and two-time speaker at Thai Initiative's leadership conferences in Seattle and Denver. It's great to see you with us again, Conrad.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you.
And in the state of Maryland, Lily Chi, chair of the Commission for Asia-Pacific American Affairs of the state of Maryland and frequent columnist in Asia Fortune magazine. This week we have the honor of publishing a guest blog from Lily on the topic of Chinese Americans engaging the election process in the National Capital Region. It was great to hear, see, and read about. Thank you for your article with us, Lily.
Thank you. May I make a small suggestion, correction? I should have mentioned that before we did the testing, which is I just stepped down from my chairmanship with the Governor's Commission, so I'm immediate past chair. I'm no longer the official chair. Just want to correct that. I'm still very active in the community as an opinion leader and a community leader.
All right. Well, thank you for that correction, Lily.
Sure.
And thanks for your service.
Thank you.
Now, today's Thai Luntan topic, immigration, is an important one, generally speaking, all over our country these days. But I'd be lying if I implied that the Chinese experience in immigration in America has been very much at the fore of our national dialogue. Today, we're going to add a bit to this important dialogue by focusing on what all Americans should know about what it's like for a Chinese to come here to this country and begin facing the question of citizenship. Now, both of you were born on China's mainland, and at varying times in your lives and in various ways you came to the United States and eventually became an American citizen. Not only that, but you're also each now a leader in your local community and government. And that is something that's generally not been very common among Chinese Americans. So, being first-generation American and leaders in your region is what you have in common. But you also each call a different region of America home, as diametrically opposed, if you will, or separated as the West and the East Coasts. And the experiences of the West Coast compared to the East Coast are probably different for Chinese coming to this country. Your commonalities and your differences form the basis from which I hope each of you will share with our audience today. So I'd like to kick it off immediately with this question. What has happened in your region of the country to either encourage or discourage Chinese immigrants to integrate with or be understood by the larger American society? Conrad, we'd like to hear from you about this first, and Lily, you can respond and interject as you wish.
First of all, I want to thank Carson and the Thai Initiative for providing this opportunity for us to be engaged in the issue of immigration. As we know, the country has been engaging immigration issues for the last dozen years or so. But, it has been extremely limited, and I do not believe that it really addresses the whole range of immigration issue that concerns immigrants such as ourselves. We've heard a lot of discussion by Congress, and basically it's very limited to the border states and the issues regarding illegal immigrants and illegal immigration. However, there's a lot of us, particularly the Asian Americans and particularly the Chinese Americans, that we immigrants have many different issues and challenges that affect us when we become citizens, residents of this great country, which is the choice that we made. However, as we have our policies move forward, we really haven't heard too much from the rest of the country's immigrants. So I think this is a very timely, a great opportunity, and I hope that this will begin a conversation and then therefore engagement of Chinese Americans and immigrants and other immigrants as well to talk about how we as immigrants can integrate into our community, can express to the rest of the country our concerns, our issues that affect ourselves, that can make our lives better, can make us more productive, can make us better citizens, and also obviously, ultimately, better citizens to be more productive at every level of a community, all the way from a good citizen to a person or people of influence, such as what Carson was saying, become leaders of this country. So I think it's very, very important. I want to thank Carson and for doing this. As to the challenges, and we know there are many, but as to the community, specific to your question, what are we doing in our community? The matter of fact is that people are coming. People are moving into United States. People are moving to our West Coast. People are moving to the Pacific Northwest because it is the closest gateway to China. And we know that there's a big interest of Chinese immigrants, both businesses and individuals, coming to the United States. They're becoming more affluent, so they're looking at other opportunities. And they obviously see this place as a place where they can better educate their children, more opportunities for advancements, and many, many other things, both economically, socially, and politically. As a result, they are here. Despite of limited immigration policy, still America, I believe, still has probably the most enlightened, the most liberal immigration policy in the world. Because that's why many of us are here. That's why they continue to be here. An example is in our city of Bellevue, we have 135 population. When I was first running for city council, first elected 20 years ago, we have less than 10% ethnic minority. But now we actually have 40% minority in our community. And so 30% or more, 1/3 were people born outside this country. So you can readily see that over 30%, 1/3 of the population are most likely immigrants, by definition, immigrants. As a result, they have many issues. They have their culture differences, language barriers, many things that they have to learn, based on the culture, based on the education, based on language, so on. So I think it's important for us, in order to have them to be productive citizens, to participate in our community, they need to be integrated. They need to let the rest of us know what are the issues that can empower them, what are issues that can help them. And so we need to get to that level. And it's different for different, obvious, immigration communities. So we got to understand what they are. And so this is really the beginning. And we're doing everything we possibly can, starting from languages. We have publications. We try to have in Chinese, have in Korean, have in Spanish. And the resources are limited, obviously, when you do something without the community realizing the importance of it. So it is my responsibility as a city council member, trying to educate and convince my fellow council members that it's important. We see the community being, looking differently, and they have different needs, different requirements. So we got to figure out how to meet those needs and requirements. So we need to, we have a community conversation. We call them a culture conversation. We invite people from the community to come to on a monthly basis to talk about the issues that are relevant to them. But when you start doing this initially, obviously the key, the challenge is always how to connect with them, how to make sure that they respond when you invite them. Many immigrants don't know how to integrate. When they are asked to do certain things, maybe they, number one, feel that it's not important to them. Two, it's not relevant to them. Three, they don't see any opportunity of making any difference. So as a result, they don't participate. So it is important, behooves us to make the effort continuously through people like us who are already in the community, who already have some credibility, some relationships building. You start everything by building relationships. So I think by doing all those things, and ultimately, there's an economic interest. There are many Chinese coming here. They settle down. They like this place. There's a place where there's no pollution. There's more freedom, and they send the kids to school, and these kids seem to be thriving. So I think they see all these as benefits. As a result, they say, well, they need to they just don't want to come here and buy a house and live here idly. They want to get into business. So, but it's not that easy because they have to learn the way of doing things in this country. They have to learn, again, the culture, business environment. So I think these are all the things that we need to help them, need to understand from them, but starting with really building the relationship, understanding what their needs are, and building trust and confidence that they actually can learn how to do those things. I think that's
certainly right. That's right, Conrad. If I may, I'd like to take what you're saying and address it into an aspect of asking Lily, because I'm sure she would say ditto to almost everything that you've been sharing here. I'd like to learn, if we can, about what it's like on the East Coast when you don't have as clear of an Asian immigrant impact as we do here on the West Coast. If any of what you've said resonates in any particular way in a different part of the country. Lily, we're Mike. We need to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know how that happened. Thank you, Carson, and thank you, Conrad. You both hit on some very important points, and this is a great question. There are clear distinctions between Chinese immigrants settling down on the East Coast versus the West Coast. The West Coast and, in fact, the California area and the Washington States and California area and the New York City East Coast both have established the Chinese communities, but not in the greater Washington, D.C. region. The greater Washington, D.C. region is relatively new to immigration, period, and the Chinese communities are just part of that new wave of immigrants. It has happened just in the past 20 years or so, so it's like less than a generation. So we're still maturing as a community, and you mentioned the impact. The impact is certainly, in a fast-growing community like where we are, the impact can be felt everywhere. But we're starting to just taking roots, feeling a sense of connectivity and feeling a sense of belonging. What happened was in the 90s, a lot of economic opportunities came up because of the internet and all the global connectivity. A lot of Chinese Americans came here for economic opportunities. What differentiates this wave of immigrants, Chinese American immigrants, is that we are highly educated and also highly globally connected. But over time, as we take roots, as we grow up both personally and as a community, we realize that financial success is not enough, intellectual and career success is not enough. We need to pay attention to social integration. Personal success is not enough. We need to pay attention to community success, how we can, as a community can be taken more seriously, how we can really have a voice collectively, how we can weigh in on local policy issues and really be treated and respected as Americans and not just as Chinese immigrants who are sort of a new wave of gold diggers, right? And to come here and make money and leave and go back home to China. So I think there are some soul-searching things that we are doing, and I'm very proud that recently I moderated a panel. It was Maryland's Congressional District 8 race, and we had candidates who joined us, 10 different candidates from 2 parties in front of an audience of over 350 people that are Chinese immigrant professionals mostly. That was our first
Lily, if I could just make a point.
forum.
Lily, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if I could just make a point for our audience that
Sure.
that is exactly the event that is the basis of the blog that is now posted
Right.
on our website that you can check out at
Exactly.
tinydish.org to see more about what Lily's saying there.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that. It's exactly right. But that was sort of a pivotal point in our community's maturity and journey toward our Americanization, if you will. We came to this awakening that we need to be much more engaged, we need to pay much more attention to the policy issues that affect our everyday life, that we belong. And that we have a voice regardless of how heavy the accent is, regardless of where we were born, regardless of what professions we are. So I think on the East Coast, and I cannot speak categorically about the East Coast Chinese Americans, but I can at least speak to this wave of Chinese immigrants in the greater Washington, D.C. region, which is huge. I would say almost approaching 250,000 now. It's a remarkable journey that is much accelerated compared to previous generations of Chinese immigrants. And because we don't have role models before us, in the California or the West Coast area in general, where you have several generations of Chinese immigrants who are running offices, who are doing things that local Americans would do. You would have that could benefit the next generations. For us, we're basically on our own. We have to carve out our own niche and charge forward and figuring out ways to connect with the larger community. Conrad mentioned a very important point about language access as part of local policy. We are also very serious about making sure we have multilingual services for our new immigrants who are still struggling to learn English. And it's a whole range of issues we have to be paying attention to in order to be very culturally competent to serve the new immigrants and to help them better integrate, from language access to land use policies. Land use policies, including, for example, how we can help new communities put down their roots by making it easier for them to build a church, a mosque, and places of worship, for example. All these are extremely important in sending a welcoming signal.
That's very true. That's very true. Let me ask, I'm curious, a lot of what I see both physically and emotionally set up in the architecture out here on the West Coast has a lot to do with the ways in which the larger numbers of early 20th century Chinese immigrants set up the areas to live. The Chinatowns got established. Every city has kind of its own story, some of them more positive, some of them much more negative.
Right.
To my knowledge, there is no story that I've yet heard, but I would only guess that New York City's Chinatown might be the strongest example. Is there any history of an East Coast city that has a marked period or portion of response, positive or negative, to Chinese immigration?
Well, as I alluded to earlier, certainly the greater Washington, D.C. region is a whole different history and chapter in our Chinese immigrant movement and integration than, say, either the more established New York City area, greater New York area, or the greater California and West Coast area, or even the greater Houston area. So every area is certainly different, with different settlement patterns. And in the greater Washington, D.C. area, which is the only area I can really speak to, as I mentioned, the communities are highly educated and very global, and therefore they have an easier time integrating and being accepted by the local communities. I would venture to say that we have been highly integrated professionally for the most part, because we are, most people here, I know at least from mainland China and Taiwan, have advanced degrees, not just higher education, but have advanced degrees. And I know certainly that's not representative of all Chinese in China or all Chinese Americans even in the United States. But because of these factors, we have accelerated process of integration. But it's still somewhat limiting to professional integration and not necessarily personal and social integration. There are still many cultural and linguistic barriers that hold us back as a community, to the point where we don't feel like we really belong here locally.
And that's a great distinction on the distinction between the political or professional integration and the social. And it looks as if Conrad's...
looks like I'm back.
Great. You're back.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Well, I guess it's great to be listening. Yeah, you really don't need to do that much to it, but I would, and I would like to. started to say I agree with Lily that the new immigrants coming this generation are quite different from the past. They are very well educated and highly motivated, and they have children that they are very interested to see prosper. And so they are very aware of the importance of having political influence. And as a result, they also understand the importance of community involvement. And I think that's really the key. The key is that they need to be engaged. But the challenge is, and they still don't know how to be engaged. It takes, lots of work, understanding the culture, I think starting out with that. So it takes some patience. And I believe that we can make observations and we can say that this generation of immigrants, as compared to the last, are different, and as a result, they may have different needs and so on. And they bring different things here also to the table. However, it doesn't change the basic fact that it's building relationship. It's how do people learn the culture and the relationship, how to build so that we can teach and learn. For example, we get into politics sounded like simple. Just do it and be involved, go do whatever. But the tradition of politics in one country, in China specifically, is very different than politics in this country. You have to have open, candid, transparency. Unfortunately, also has to be based on law, and there's a lot of professionals. That's why the lawyers are so important in our lives. But then also we have to have the ethics. We have to have the upbringing of understanding what is legal, what is reasonable, what is transparent. So all these things have to come over time through the things that we do, getting our feet wet, making lots of mistakes, and then learning from our successes and mistakes, and then build on successes. So I think we cannot be impatient. We have to make sure that we go through that process. I believe one of the most important things that I learned in this country is sometimes you cannot really predict, you cannot dictate what the results may be, but you must learn the process. If you don't learn the process, if you don't know how to play the game, if you don't know the rules of the game, you are going to find a lot of challenges, oppositions, and pushbacks. And that creates further misunderstanding and making mistakes, and it's not easy. So I think that we do, however, we have the will and we have the interest of the new immigrants. As a result, I think we have the opportunity to do something about it, and it's up to people like us, like this kind of forum, for us to conduct, conversations, and hopefully give them the opportunity to be engaging with each other. And furthermore, not just engaging with each other, but engaging with the greater community, with the mainstream folks, with the system, understanding how this can work. Then we can make a bigger step once we take the smaller step. So I think this is really something I would encourage us looking how we can start at the first step, rather than maybe getting to be a little bit too impatient and jumping too far, even though that's still the ultimate goal that we are going to be looking at. Like Billy said, we are here as Americans. We are here for the benefit of all of us coming here. For the first reason is for the well-being of everyone, and to do that again is to that the whole community need to have the benefit and also benefit from our presence of being. So I don't know whether on the East Coast or West Coast. I think the difference that there's a more advantage of the coastal people. People on the coast, we have more connection, more relationship, more involvement with with the Asians and Chinese and Americans and local folks. But we haven't talked about the Midwest. I think the Midwest is where maybe even the bigger challenges are. Where there's not enough connection, relationship, understanding, working together on real issues. Sometimes it may not be easy, but thorny. So I think we need to.
Very interesting observation, and exactly why we wanted to be able, and unfortunately weren't able to get Swallow Yan in Iowa in to join us in on this one. But hearing what you're saying, I think it's all the more important that we have a second approach to this topic again, perhaps later this summer. We can have another integration of this discussion and take it a step and then learn about what's going on in the Midwest. Last year at the DC conference, we had as one of our key speakers former Missouri Governor Bob Holden, and he, even though he is not Chinese American, he certainly would have a lot to share about what is happening in the Midwest in the America-China relationship.
Agree. If I could just, piggyback on Conrad's great points, I think he emphasized a lot about relationship building. I think from community perspective, relationship building is certainly a two-way street. On the one hand, we need to be more outward-facing in our thinking. Whatever we do, the Chinese community is great at celebrating holidays, and there's always food involved, and it's a great sense of community. Sometimes a larger community is actually not necessarily a great thing because we tend to get self-contained. We have all the services provided by people who speak our languages. We get too comfortable. We go to send our kids to Chinese language schools on weekends and all that. We just become our own community and get more and more insulated socially in that sense, right? So you actually have to make a purposeful decision to integrate. You actually have to reach out, and Chinese media need to start integrating English content so that other people can read it and introduce to other people. I mean, these are all decisions that we make as organizations, as individuals, as schools, and as communities together. How much do we want to integrate? It doesn't just happen. If we let our habit kick in, it usually is whatever is comfortable, And I think because this wave of Chinese immigrants came mostly from countries that are doing relatively well. When we left China, China was not what it is today. But now China is a remarkably developed country. It has much to be proud of. And because of that, it has drawn a lot of talent back to China. And a lot of people here are going back and forth between China and the United States. While on the one hand, it certainly is great in facilitating understanding economic opportunities and educational exchange, what have you, but it also makes it more challenging to anchor them locally, to pay attention to local civic affairs and really, really get involved in local politics. And that's the challenge that I'm seeing. Unlike some other countries, Asian countries even, where their countries is not some place you want to go back to, right? So it actually makes it easier. And their community is so small, they have to integrate with a larger community. But, these are real issues we are facing, which is when you are so large and largely comfortable and successful, why would you want to bother to make an extra effort to be understood and integrated? And also, when your home country, when your home country is doing so well, you have a lot of reason to say, oh, I can just pack up and go, and I go back and forth every year. Why do I want to care about voting, at local level, right? So I think these are some unique challenges that we face in the greater Washington, D.C. region, especially, as I see. And if I could add one last point, that is trust building. Relationship building is about trust. You hear in the media about all kinds of issues that the United States accuses China of, and that has an impact that casts a shadow on how Americans generally perceive people from China, and they cannot always differentiate between Chinese Americans and people from China, or just people in China even. You look like, sound alike, talk like sometimes, and they just think you have people to be suspected. And incidents like Chinese American scientists being suspected of espionage and all that, it speaks to a larger issue of mistrust. Unless you do something to really show that we not only belong, that we deeply care about what's happening here, we care about issues bigger than our own community, then you are not going to close that trust gap.
I'm very glad you said that.
I like one point, speaking on the how, that's important. We all have a vision, we have goals we want to accomplish, the well-being, betterment for our lives. But I want to tell a story in our community. Recently, there's a group of parents living in a particular neighborhood, very highly educated, well-to-do neighborhood. And the state of Washington has recently allowed the use of marijuana, legalization of marijuana use. Okay. So each city are required to allow how many marijuana stores, retail stores. And so the city worked very hard to come up with certain requirements and so on. And the law, when it was passed kind of overwhelmingly. It's close to 70%. Because there are many reasons why people support it, especially in the city of Washington, which is usually quite a progressive state. And it has good reasons because they feel that the medical marijuana can really be helpful. It's useful for people who need them. And then two, there's a choice people can have to purchase marijuana if they want to. And there's not enough medical evidence to prove it's a benefit or not otherwise. So as a result, it was overwhelmingly approved. And obviously, it was done some time ago. When the law is approved, then the implementation, so it's the detail, it's the thing that really affects people, that hits people right, where they feel. So when the stores are being opened, if it's open somewhere else, they don't really mind either. But just happen that the stores are open close to their neighborhood, where their children go to school, go to stores, so they feel very, very scared, fearful that marijuana is not going to be good for their children. It's going to be bad effect, or will lead to a lot of potential misuse, abuse of drugs and other kind of things, and which is becoming a very severe problem for the nation and for the parents especially. So they immediately, within 1 week, they gathered 400, and then in 2 weeks gathered 1,000 signatures and came to the city council and said, we do not want to have the store sited in our neighborhood. And they said, well, we didn't know about it when it was passing the state legislature overwhelmingly, because they probably never even voted, because they never even pay attention the impact of marijuana, because they're not involved, they're not engaged in politics.
That's right.
Many things in politics happen over time, not overnight. So in order to be effective, you have to be engaged, you have to be involved, you have to be in the game. You cannot just say last minute, oh, I want to become an Olympic basketball player. No, you have to train, you have to set up a team, you have to have coaches. All these things are necessary. So as a result, they came to City Council and we heard it. And there's obviously, even now, it's an issue where 60% or maybe more people will support it. So they're a minority group. But it's important that they become aware of it, they become familiar with the issue, and they choose to be engaged. I think these are all very positive things. But it's a process. Are they going to be successful? Are they right to begin with? When you talk about politics, usually it's 50-50. There's nothing, very few things are 100% right, 0% wrong. So it's a political process. And so I think it's good for them to know that, to understand it, to know what they can do, the importance of speaking out, what they support, what they do not support. So I think this is the example of having engaging the Chinese immigrants and figuring out how they can develop a process where they can actually be effective in influencing public policies. And example is, if they learn enough, they should understand the issues that most people support, not just them what they do, and so they can work on it. If the issue is not, then they need to start building coalitions, building support among everybody and really explaining, educating folks. So I think this is a process through which they learn. But to begin that process, we need to do a lot of work. The government, individually, community, we, Thai Initiative, we all have to reach out. We have to say, these are the things, and why is this important, how we can prepare ourselves. And so it will take some time, but I think this is an important step that we have to initiate, and we have to move forward.
Exactly right, moving forward. And I liked what you said in wrapping up here about coalitions and about, let's see, it was putting together a coalition of folks and then essentially reaching out, and that is and education. That's what I was trying to remember, and making a focus on education. That certainly is what we're trying to do today. I know that we have achieved some of that to a certain degree, and I'm very glad that we had this long and robust conversation. Though we did start a little later, we certainly did have a lot to say today, and it went longer than we might otherwise have expected, but it's only proof that we need to do this again. We need to do this more often. Lily, if there's anything in closing that you'd like to add, I know your comments were kind of made in closing, but is there anything final before we find?
I think it's an incremental process. We start by paying attention on a set of issues, policy issues that our community cares deeply about, and we'll go from there and grow up as a community. I'm very confident we'll get there, and we'll get there quicker than our previous generations of Chinese immigrants.
Yeah. Thanks. And Conrad, in closing, I just have a simple question for you. If you can give us a short answer on what was it in your life that got you involved in politics?
I want to make a difference. And I believe that's, someone from an immigrant in a country where a lot of things that I see that I can make a difference.
Good.
So as a result, I feel that, that's simply it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, in this age where information technology has given young people so much ability to make a difference and not just simply consume data, I think that's something that will be fun to educate people on more and more about how to both want to and how to. Well, Conrad, Lily, thank you very much for attending with us today. I'm glad you had so much to share. Next time we'll have to get the Midwest in here. And this is the TIE Initiative signing off. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Lily.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.